Summary: the classic Heavy is Dead video, recreated with excruciating detail for every action, character, and thought. Alright. Okay, here we go. The Heavy exited the spawn room, shouting a cheerful song to himself. It was a beautiful day outside, one that would make anyone so grateful to be alive. The Heavy, ever so playful soul, announced the fact to the world. It is a good day to be not dead, sang the Heavy. Despite his thick Russian accent, his words were easily understood. Not the fact that there was anyone around to understand him, or so he thought. Suddenly, a loud shot rang out. Blood splattered across Heavy's temple as a figure carrying a smoking weapon emerged from the shadows. It was none other than the engineer, Heavy's trusted friend. A toothy, blood-curdling smile stretched across his bludgeoning face. "Pow! You're dead!" shrieked the assassin with delight. "I am dead!" cried the Heavy, the shock coursing through his lifeless body, causing him to collapse on the ground. The engineer chuckled to himself. The job, the dark, cruel deed he has set out to achieve, has been completed. The Heavy was dead. The only thing left was to hide the incriminating evidence and disappear before the corpse was found. Unfortunately, his task would be proven to far more difficult, as he anticipated. From a distance, the engineer could make out the telltale humming of Spy, another member of Heavy's circle of confidence. Am I recording? I'm recording. Okay. I just want to make sure. Confidence! Ah, shucks! Muttered the engineer. He scrambled to depose the murder weapon and adopted a look of innocence. One that would do him well should the spy come and question his presence at the scene of the crime. The spy arrived. A natural investigator, the spy analyzed the scene in an instant and reached out an absolute conclusion. He gasped. "The Heavy is dead!" declared the spy. The words came out before he was to entirely process his emotions. "Yes," confirmed Heavy from beyond, or rather, within the grave. "I am dead." Spy couldn't believe his eyes. He started searching for his mind for a reason. Any reason that would help him make sense of this traumatic scene laid out in front of him. "Why is the Heavy dead?" questioned Spy, in an excellent choice of philosophical approach of forensic investigation. It's always been Spy's strong suit, often giving him the advantage against even the most objective of criminals. However, this tactic would not aid him against the expert Charlutin? Oh, that was the engineer. "I don't know," said the engineer, lying through his teeth and keeping his cool composure so not to draw suspicion unto himself. With both spy and engineer at loss, the Heavy decided it may be a good idea, maybe as good as a time as any to speak up. After all, he was the victim, perhaps, of the crime. Perhaps indulging his side of the story may be able to help Spy reach a conclusion. To identify the killer, it was the only option he had left. "I think it was," he began. However, before the Heavy could complete his thought, the engineer and Spy reminded him quickly of his recent passing. "Shh, you're dead," they both hissed. Information on the killer's whereabouts may be important, but not the cost of violating very laws of nature and community themselves. "Okay," says Heavy, clipping compactedly and violently into the ground. The conversation was suddenly brought to a halt by screeching of tires. A large camper pulled into view, piloted by none other than the sniper. He let out of his recreational vehicle and addressed his comrades, energetic as ever. "What's up, you winkas?" said the sniper. The charm of his self-employed Australian assassin could muster. Surely his friends be interested around a fun on YouTube, appropriate adultery. Who's up for a fun? Ah! But before he could finish his proposal, the sniper felt something cold in the air. The atmosphere of the hospital room was unusually tense. The spy was wearing a pained expression, as although hope and joy was drained from his body, leaving him hollow and grunt. And that's why he had the engineer fail to make eye contact since Sniper's arrival? What troubled him most, however, was heartbreaking image of the Heavy, his dear friend, lying still and dare he say, lifeless on the bed in the center of the room. Sniper felt a deep, deep sadness wash over him, but there was something else here too. Fear. Fear of what he did not know, fear of what he did not want to know. Maybe if he wasn't inquire about the situation, he could simply ignore it and be on his merry way, and yet he felt compelled to ask. He knew the truth. He wanted to know the truth. He did not want to live in ignorance for a second longer. Sniper mustered up the courage to ask the question that needed to be asked. They feared the answer more than anything. What the bloody hell just happened? The heavy is dead, prompted spy and engineer in tandem. That was it. The final question to win all the money. That Sniper needed to choose his words carefully, or else risk losing it all. He had sacrificed so much to make it this far. He was about to throw it away on his multiple choice question. With 500,000 on the line, the Sniper provided his final answers. The heavy is dead? Correct, confirmed Spy. Which, to an elated Sniper, how rich with the respect of his companions as well. Cold, hard cash. However, his victory would not flee him from suspicion. The Sniper and the engineer would prove to be the first of the Spy's long line of rigorous questioning. The crime scene cornered off, and all the witnesses grouped together. Spy began his interrogation. He didn't want to have to question his best friend, but the evidence was clear. The engineer and the Sniper were prime suspects. So, did you see the murderer? Inquired the Spy. Nope, sorry mate, they both responded. Drat, after all that work, Spy had reached a dead end. At this point, it was most detectives would call it quits, pack it in, throw in the towel. But the Spy knew better than that. He knew the times of difficulty, when all hope seems lost, all true heroes are made, and Spy knew that this time he had to be the hero for his friends. For the heavy! With redoubled effort, the Spy pounded on the table, nearly splintering the wood. His fever for justice coursed through his veins, controlling every cell in his body. Spy stood in his chair, speaking firmly and confidently. I will find him. I will capture him. And no one will ever die again, he said with determination. Engineer, Sniper, and a tiny tiger moved by to the Bravo which their friends conduct his work. Blamed the compelling apply to his exemplary performance. But the celebration was cut short as someone commanded the group's attention. Attention! Cried the soldier, announcing his arrival to the masses. He came up bearing urgent news of forensic feelings, no doubt gathering during his lengthy introduction. Hold on, I need to...
Waiter?
Mm-hmm. I don't think I'm halfway through. I'm not even halfway through fucking fiction.
Breathe!
Ooh, I'm not even halfway through the page.
I want to break free.
I want to break free. Okay. Okay. One soldier, let's go. The heavy is dead, proclaimed the soldier, proud of his work. We know, replied the Spy with irritation. Who killed him? The soldier probed further. We don't know, the Spy said. Said the Spy, growing increasingly frustrated with each incoming question. Spy didn't mean to speak in such an annoyed tone, but he'd grown tired of recounting the same information yet to another one of the Heavy's friends. He could hardly enough time to carry out his own investigation, far less mourn the loss of his friends, and reenact 19th century fine art, and yet it fell to him brief, a very newcomer to the case. It hardly seemed fair. Even worse when the soldier, another detective, whom the Spy held a bit of a rivalry against his bandages and the slow-on-the-draw demeanor, lay the wit and instruction of a shrewd investigator, with skills to no rival those even the Spy. Even if anyone were to butt their head into this case, the Spy had hoped it wouldn't be him. I will find clues, the soldier announced. He committed himself to the case, but the words he spoke free of any emotion. The Heavy was a dear friend to the soldier. The soldier wanted nothing more than to take the time to look back on some of the most cherished memories together, and remember that everything his friend meant to him Right now, there was a job to be done, and the soldier was just the man to do it. He was the rock and the mercenary group needed, and would take everything he had to keep his professional composure from crumbling under the weight of his immense grief. He searched the crime scene with the scent of a bloodhound's intense, curious as his colleagues looked on. If the spy couldn't help but admire his scrutiny and attention to detail as he sniffed out clues. Eventually, he came across something very peculiar in a nearby pile of trash. "What's this?" he said, picking up an odd item with a closer look. He analyzed every inch of the smoking object before coming to the grim conclusion that devious instrument could easily be used to take a man's life. "A weapon!" declared the soldier, holding it high for all to see. The gears in the soldier's head began to turn, the pieces laid out in front of him. All he had to do was put them together. At this time, an evil chill ran down the soldier's spine. He didn't know what this weapon was meant for the case, but he became afraid if he searched any further, he would be putting himself up and all his friends in great danger. But he put those feelings aside and searched for his heart for the answer. He found it. "That's why the heavy is dead," cried the soldier. The revelation sent shock into the souls of all the onlookers. "The heavy is dead!" screamed the mercenaries. "How could this be? Could the heavy, their dearest friend, truly be dead?" "Yes," asserted the soldier, with all the fervor of Ace Attorney. "He died!" Spy, engineer, and sniper gasped. Hardly enough time to register their own surprise before they were interrupted by yet another interested party. Call of "Incoming Ratus Ratus!" preceded the arrival of a medic, who carefully parked his ambulance before hurrying to the body. "Move!" he yelled, pushing Spy and his friends away so he might perform the most sacred of medical procedures. The medic kissed the heavies gingerly on the forehead. Spy, engineer, and sniper held on to suspense at the treatment for its work. For a moment, it felt like Heavy's body was filled with life, and he seemed to laugh? Or this merely could be air trapped inside the corpse's lungs, finally escaping? Could Heavy pull this thread along? Sniper was unable to comprehend. I think I'm reading too fast. What he was seeing. The flower of hope withered since the death of his friend, began to blossom once more again, but his heart was soon crushed, as Heavy's lifeless body exploded into a million pieces. Bloods and giblets ran down upon everybody in the vicinity. The medic wiped the versa from his brow, sealing the herbs for what he must do. Throughout his career, Medic had performed complex surgeries and countless experimental procedures, but delivering the news of the death of a loved one was always the most difficult part of his profession. He chose his next words carefully, that they would nobody wanted to hear, but they came out somberly. "In my medical profession, that Heavy is dead!" Spy and his friends were stunned. Could their friend, the lively, cheerful Heavy, who brought so much joy to their lives, could truly be dead? The sniper found himself unable to comprehend the information. He searched his brain for answers, but found none. He knew not trouble the spy engineer, as they were likely just emotional and distressed to he, but not so more. Perhaps the medical professional in the room could allow him some clarity. "Doc, what happened?" he asked the medic. The medic wasn't so sure of himself. He hadn't witnessed the Heavy's death. He was simply arrived at the provided trident. It was too late at that. That being said, he did have a hunch that was happy presented if he knew they provided some sort of closure. "By medical precision, the Heavy was killed," he declared, with the decisive power of an expert professor, the stoic demeanor of the marble statue. "My God!" exclaimed the dumbfounded sniper. He turned to his friends, the spy and engineer, and various Crash Bandicoot characters shrugged to comprehend this reality. Who would kill the Heavy? And who brought so much happiness to their lives? The medic quickly realized that his verdict had brought more harm than good. He sheepishly provided an alternative to this logic. "Hopefully no one will blame him for the panic he caused. I don't think it's anything to worry about," he said, hopping away gutlessly. "Well, now what?" asked Sniper, proposing. He found himself at a loss. He could simply bury the friend and leave the Expected murder forever. Unprocessed? Would justice never be found? As these troubled thoughts floated through the mind of both Sniper and the spy, an irritating holler came from the distance. Clippity-clop, motherfucking boom! Spy immediately recognized this as the signature catchphrase of Scout, the only person who would dare use such obscenities at a time like this. Come on, groaned the spy. As this was not a time nor the place for Scout to intervene. After all, their dear friend, the Heavy, has just died. The spy was in no good mood to entertain Scout's crass and childish buffoonity. The Scout, giving his situation a quick glance, noticed the Heavy sitting upright on the ground, dead. Surely this would be a perfect time for one of his classic farces. He sprinted to the body, drawing everyone's attention. Look at this, the friggin' Heavy's dead, he said, attempting to inspire his friends to laugh, but attracting none. What do you think of that? He prods further. The group's silence seemed to last forever. The Scout completely run out of comedic material, and yet not a single laughter, snort, or guffaw could be heard from his audience. And yet, all eyes were on him. He felt intensely uncomfortable. Stammered the Scout, awkwardly trying to break the silence any means necessary. Yes, Scout, interrupted the spy. The Scout became immediately optimistic. Would Spy provide the approval he so craved? He actually waited for the praise of his comrade, but it would never come. Go home, commanded the spy. His voice filled with rage and disgust. The Scout was confused. He just had already arrived, and already being asked to leave? By his closest companion, no less? He turned his head, and it was all made clear. There was his mother sat in the family car, beckoning like the angel of death. Ah, come on, exclaimed the Scout. He just began to entertain his friends of his humorous antics, and his mother had already arrived to him to pick him up. It was so unfair. His frustration and anger combined into a word amalgamation as he spoke to his speech comparable to his running Billy. Fucking unbelievable, you guys seriously suck. He cursed. He cursed at his friends for betraying him, forcing him to leave. Cursed his mother for cutting in the time to cut a short shirt. He cursed the Heavy for whose tragic passing failed to provide perfect comedic material. He would have cursed more, but merely seconds later, Scout and his mother crashed into a rock. This would not dissuade Spy, however, as he's been subjected to too many distractions. There was a murder mystery to be solved. Okay, let's get back to the point, he spoke indicatively. The sniper nodded in agreement. He too was anxious to see the long investigation come to a close. It was time for Heavy to provide his option. The Heavy stayed quiet for much of the investigation. He preferred not to take up the bickering of his comrades, and he did not care for Scout's off-brand quality, and yet declared early on to give his case throughout and listened from an outsider's perspective. After all, the Heavy was a very important person to him. The Heavy, a person deserved his respect and full attention. I think Heavy is dead, proposed the Heavy. The Heavy's forensic approach was very well regarded by the professional detectives like the spy and even the soldier, but this revelation came completely out of nowhere. It was met with adequate surprise from Heavy's and fellow investigators. The Heavy is dead, exclaimed the mercenaries in shock. How could this be? How could their dear friend Heavy, who they spent countless hours of fun-filled adventure, be dead? While this information further engrossed the engineer, the sniper, and the spy in the case, the medic's attention was drawn somewhere else. At the sight of the Scout's car crash, the medic let out an audible gasp. Ever since the death of Hetty, the medic has been racked with guilt, and the way he blamed himself for all that happened. All his friends. The medic was the one skilled in medicine. If he couldn't save his closest comrade, what good of a doctor would, or even a friend, would matter? But that could change. The Scout, his beloved friend, a key member of the investigation, was in trouble with a fiery explosion of confidence. The medic sprinted towards the crashed car. Not again, he whispered to himself. He wouldn't be late. He can't be late. Scout, I'll heal you, he shouted. But it was too late. The fire from the crash had ignited the gas tank of Scout's family car, and the medic's metaphorical explosion of confidence was met with an explosion that was all too real. He was annihilated in an instant by the oncoming fireball. Heavy had grown tired of the conscious distractions, and he needed to know who killed Heavy for the sake of his own sanity. Oh, seriously, who killed Heavy? He shouted with frustration. Usually the Heavy would restrain himself from using such a harsh tone with his friends, but he felt this time it was unwarranted. Little did Heavy realize the answer to his question would come sooner than he had anticipated. 2 large gugs was heard of the crowd, followed by no words they thought they'd hear. "It was me," confessed a mysterious Scottish voice. The mercenaries knew in an instant who the voice belonged to. They turned to see their pal demo man sitting confidentially with a devilish grin across his face. The mercenaries gasped in shock. The demo man was a bit of an outsider in the group. He was always welcome at family-friendly gatherings and death matches, but not knows much about the suspicious individual. The spy, engineer, and sniper and Heavy were surprised to hear his confession, but they would be lying to say if Demoman wasn't the most likely suspect. "Yes," confirmed the demo man. Alcohol had the habit of finding a way into the demo man's mouth. Despite the gravity of the situation requiring the utmost sobriety and gravity of the earth not allowing to that'd be physically impossible. "I did it like this." Boom! The demo man whipped out a firearm and shot a slug forcefully in the sniper's chest. Then he was knocked back several yards himself. "Whoop-de-doo!" the demo man cheered. He was so proud of his demonstration. He performed a small dance, although it appeared a bit off, kilter due to his intoxication. The spy, engineer, and Heavy couldn't believe what just transpired. The demo man, their dear friend, not only admitted to the crime of the killing of the Heavy, but he murdered the sniper right in front of everyone's eyes. The spy and Heavy held Sniper's limp, bleeding body in their arms. They couldn't believe this was true. They didn't want to believe it was true. Luckily, it wasn't true. After a belch and a swing of his liquor, Demoman was quick to put out the worries to rest. "That was a joke, lads," Demoman clarified. The spy, engineer, and Heavy broke into simultaneous laughter, as if the Demoman was known for everything. It was knowing the right time for a perfect joke. Talented, yet the scout was not yet to master. Demoman sucked up on bottles of whiskey, and released an unapologetic burp. Alcohol always helped the Demoman clear his mind, and to prepare for what he was about to say, he did utmost clarity. "It was yo." The Demoman started for burping. "Him." The spy followed Demoman's line of sight to see who he was pointing to. None other than the engineer. How could this be? Could the Heavy been killed by one of his closest friends? The engineer was equally baffled. Could this figure, shrouded in mystery, have been sent to commit the crime? Impossible. He was surely to know that were no witnesses, and yet the truth was revealed not by him, but by the demo man. The engineers needed to be satisfied with his curiosity. How even found out? "How did you know?" the engineer asked, hoping for some kind of exclamation. The demo man removed his bottle from his mouth. "I didn't," the demo man chided. He let out a burp before explaining further. "It was a joke, too." The demo man casually returned to his drink, though he had himself the greatest mystery of the modern era. Engineer couldn't believe it. What just happened? The demo man... Oh, I need another moment. I'm almost at the end.
Mention how Demo Man dies off screen from alcohol poisoning?
It kinda does.
Okay, cool. Good.
Okay, the demo man hasn't revealed his guilt. He did. The mysterious figure currently drinking himself into a critical shit. That was one part of the education the engineer didn't quite account for. Followed by the mere graph of the drunk Scotsman, he couldn't help but laugh. And he did. And laugh he did. He laughed and laughed and laughed. There was nothing so unsettling in the maniacal cackling of this Texan mastermind. His foul deeds had been so expertly crafted, so perfectly constructed, that he should know by whoever traced the murder back to him. And he was right. In his hubris, he failed to secure the most stable variable, himself, the one person who knew everything and had relieved it all. "That's right, it was me!" Engineer announced triumphantly. "You monster!" This related the spy through tears. The anger couldn't begin to describe how Spy felt. How could Engineer take the life of a closest comrade? The reason therefore possibly be? The Heavy seemed to wonder the same thing. "But why?" he cried, dumbfounded. "'Cause you're fat, boy," said the engineer angrily. "And another thing, you're ugly." The Heavy, insulted by the engineer's accusation, but wasn't the least bit surprised. The engineer was a famously vain individual, but he put an intense amount of care to his appearance. He held his friend to a similarly high standard to the engineer. Seeing someone put so little effort into the way they look felt like a betrayed trust, especially when the person was his closest friend. He couldn't bear to get to see his betrayal continued, and so he killed the Heavy. The Heavy became equally furious. He couldn't let this logic stand. He tried to explain to the engineer the area's ways. The engineer had none of this, and the conversation soon became an argument. Obscenities flew back and forth. No topic was off limits for the consult's criticism. The Spy shrugged. The Heavy and engineer have known to argue from time to time. It was tradition after all. But he imagined such vulgar hate was being harbored secretly among friends. The Heavy knew he had to put this end into madness. "Engineer!" he screamed, enlarging his head. His apathy was disturbed by Engineer's line of thinking. He could temporarily cease fire amidst the constant barrage of insults, and use this opportunity to bring Engineers to his senses. But his gross tux displayed only seemed to seat the engineer further into rage. "Ah, damn it, Heavy, fuck off," cursed the engineer. He had grown tired of looking at the appealing figure that sat before him. He searched his mind for a method he could use, a trick or scheme that allowed him to rid of Heavy once for all, but nothing came. His plan was completely, utterly ruined by his own hands. He's used a trick in every arsenal, but he could not escape his punishment that waited for him. Even worse, the Heavy, his arch foe, who was sure was killed earlier, stood before him, healthy as the day he was born. But how could that be? Something wasn't adding up. The engineer was losing his grip on reality. He grasped his head in his hands and sulked into the bar, trying to make sense of everything. "You're dead!" He insisted desperately. That was his last gambit. Perhaps he could convince the Heavy he was not truly alive. He had shaken off the earthly coil and moved on to a better place. He might still see his master plan come into fruition, and maybe, just maybe, he could— oh my fucking god.
And maybe, just maybe, the Reaper calls.
The Reaper calls! God damn it.
Allow me to enlighten you. Where is it?
Oh my god.
Oh, yes.
I hope my microphone recorded all of that, because that's not gonna make any sense in after I finish recording this and post this.
You're just insane. We're figments of your imagination.
Oh fuck, you guys are. Okay, we're almost done. I think we're almost done.
God damn it, Hammy, fuck off!
It took everything in Heavy not to smile at the thought of the incoming victory. Despite his best efforts, the weary smirk came through. The engineer's accusation posted a significant threat, but the Heavy had prepared a surefire technique to turn the tide in his favor. The Heavy took a deep breath, a technique demanded and required for perfect precision. Even the slight slip-off could result in catastrophe. He hit steady aim and aligned his fingers into a proper position. The Heavy, though enough death for one day, he and his friends have been through so much today. He has taken heavy losses, from which they might recover. There was some part of him that did not want to end it like this. But he knew the engineer had to be punished. His reputation was delivered by his hand. He could see it through. The spy looked away, for he knew what would happen next. Without a beat, the Heavy pointed his fingers towards the engineer and performed his perfect technique, the ultimate reversal. "No, you! Pow!" screamed the Heavy. A shot rang out. A telltale crack echoed for miles. Letting everyone know the events that transpired here, the engineer's body, mutilated and disfigured, went flying back. He'd been hit with the same accusation that's been thrown. The heavy merely... What the fuck?
He was hit.
The same accusation he had thrown the heavy merely seconds ago was over. The merciless villain has been defeated. The engineer was dead. The heavy, who had been thrown back from the force of the blast, regained his composure. He would slowly further perfect his technique to diminish the amount of recoil in the future, but for the moment he seemed unharmed. He brushed himself off, and seeing what was left of the engineer's body, he was compelled to laugh. "Ha ha! Ha ha! You're dead! No big surprise," he contorted. The spy, less impressed, with an intense feeling of shame, had washed over him. He'd surely spent his entire day arguing with his friends about a murder that, in the end, become undone? He really has been an accomplice of the deaths of his friends? The spy felt sick. He'd rather die than see his reputation crumble from such embarrassing series of events. To have his name be exponentially tied to such stupidity? Well, that was idiotic. "I'll have to hang myself," he said, trying to maintain some sense of pride. He couldn't for very long. He affixed a nearby noose to his neck and set up a chair and took a running start. He intended to kill himself, but that doesn't mean he can go out of style. "Watch and learn," called the spy with a running start. He stepped off the chair and flipped in a glorious arching motion that would make even Olympic gymnastics envious of his skill. The spy swung with such grace that even after the force of the flip had completely snapped his neck, his limp body retained the posture of a dainty hummingbird above, hovering in midair. The heavy, choosing to ignore this traumatic series of events, declared the further task of the glory of his recent victory. "I am alive," he announced triumphantly. "It is nice," but in the creeping sense of shame encroached upon Heavy's consciousness as well. As he looked back on the events that transpired upon all his lives that had been lost on his behalf, he began to realize what had happened here today. Nothing short of utter ridiculousness. "Yes, this is stupid," spoke Heavy and most involuntarily. He, too, was having trouble grasping this sense of guilt and embarrassment that had driven the spy to suicide. But he had these thoughts aside, as he proudly stood in defiance of all he's been through. He smiled. After all, it was a beautiful day outside. He was grateful to be alive. And that was The Heavy is Dead, but a very long, unnecessary detailed short story. Yay! Thank you to this wonderful person, this Snailian, for writing this wonderful fucking fanfiction.
Yay! Thank you!
Wow.
Where the fuck did that come from?
Wow.
This person only has one fanfiction, and it's just The Heavy is Dead fanfiction.
It's beautiful.
There's just this whole account just has this one story. And you know, I feel like it should stay like that. They should never write another fanfiction on this account. They gotta go make a new one.
Never write again.
Never write again, this Snailian. Never write again.
We will judge you.
We won't actually judge you, but
joke.
Yeah, it was a joke. Please, if you ever find this video, please do not actually take that as a threat. And I've been recording for almost 35 minutes. What the hell?
Worst comes to worst, I can throw us in the blender.
Throw it into the blender, you go.
Into the blender!
Man!